So for people who aren't familiar with it, can you explain specifically what he was doing to facilitate all the drug trade?
Yeah. So in I believe it was 1973, the DEA is created, maybe 1972, but 73, the drug trade is like really kicking off, and the United States government recognizes the drug trade coming out of Colombia as like a super serious issue, right? Something that like really is like a problem. Where before that, the spread of communism was sort of like the biggest problem the US government had. Now the drug trade was. So Escobar and the Ochoas and the cartel were, just generating a lot more money, and their routes to the United States were becoming a lot more complex, and drugs were sneaking in to the country. So Noriega recognizes that this is a problem for the US, and advantageously, he becomes like the guy to curb drug trades between Latin America and the United States. In 1973, he actually gives a speech to the UN about the threat of the drug trade. He calls drugs the fifth horseman of the apocalypse. This is documented. I have the article in my book. Like, it's there, right? This is 1973, 16 years before the United States invasion of Panama, 15 years before they indict him for racketeering and money laundering and drug smuggling, okay? So Noriega has been on this for a while. And as the years progress in the 1970s, the drug trade just rapidly increases. I know this because the now declassified documents that I have from the DEA show the numerical figures drastically increasing over the years. These letters explicitly say, we caught this guy in this location with this much cocaine, right? And the Panama Canal being the nucleus of all of this, right? So many drugs used to pass through the Panama Canal. And the United States owned the canal, right? US troops were on canal territory, but they had Noriega and the National Guard sort of, take care of it, okay? I like to say that when the United States needed their trash taken out in Central America and Latin America, they called Noriega, okay? Because they didn't really want to do it themselves. So the 1980s roll around, 1983 specifically, Noriega becomes the dictator of Panama. Escobar and the Ochoas they're just, becoming way richer. The drug trade is just intensifying so much more. And in 1984, Escobar has a politician assassinated. I know his last name was Bonilla. I forget Rodrigo Bonilla, maybe.
The commerce guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in 1984. And Escobar has to flee Colombia, and Noriega takes him in. Right, he takes him into Panama. The reason that he gave was that the previous dictator of Panama, Omar Torrijos, was really good friends with Escobar, and that he didn't really want to take him in, but he did, right? So Noriega's playing all parties in this situation, and he just becomes strong through his relationships. So the DEA recognized that this drug trade is drastically increasing. All of the facts and figures are showing that there are so many more drugs coming into the US, right? Specifically through Florida, through Texas, basically just anywhere with a coastline in the Gulf of Mexico, all of these places, and also these airstrips in Texas and Louisiana, the movie American Made with Tom Cruise. Yeah. So these guys, these CIA pilots, were loading up their planes with drugs from Escobar's guys, and they had these routes down, right?
We had the pilot who hired Barry Seal on the show.
No way.
Yeah.
What did he have to say?
Oh my God, it was incredible. He was just telling all the stories about how the first day he hired him, and then how Barry flipped on him and brought him to dinner. Basically, the whole story ended where they're in Santa Monica, I think. And Barry's like, hey, I want to meet for dinner or whatever. And he's meeting for dinner with him. And then they're talking, and Barry breaks down in tears. And they're in this room. And he's looking around. And he's like, Barry, are these all FBI agents? He goes, yeah, every single one of them. And then the FBI guy comes, sits down at the table with him. And he goes, Roger, that's the guy who hired Barry. He's like, you got two choices. You can ride first class with us back to Miami tomorrow morning with your wife, or you can come back in handcuffs. Your choice is yours. He ended up doing I think he did 40 something years in 8 different prisons because he escaped. He escaped 6 or 7 prisons.
Holy shit.
He ended up doing most of his time in Australia because that was one of the most maximum security prisons that he couldn't escape. But dude, it was a wild story. He was flying back and forth he was like a pilot in his teenage years, in his early 20s, with some sort of like ministry. And then he moved to California, working for the fire department. And then one day, one guy just like said, "Hey man, I heard you fly airplanes." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You want to make $1 million this weekend?" And he's like, "Hell yeah." So we ended up doing this once a week and one trip back to Mexico, $1 million. Started out with weed and then it graduated up to cocaine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit, dude. Well, yeah, I mean, that's nuts.
Yeah.
That's nuts. So, I mean, all of that, like all of these stories, it's just like one giant spider web, right? But when it comes to, like, I guess the, like Noriega being at like the center of it all, it really just, it's about all those relationships that he cultivated. So he was playing all parties. So he was playing the DEA by saying, "Hey, we're going to curb this drug trade," right? So, which he genuinely did. Like there was a whole group, it was called the DENI within Panama. I forget what the acronym stands for, but you know, it was to curb the drug trade. Then Noriega, you know, this is why he went to prison and why the US invasion of Panama happened, but he was sort of allowing some stuff to come through Colombia, to my knowledge, right? Carlos never admitted to any of this, by the way. This was all me doing my own investigations. People obviously know this, and you know, it's naive to think that a guy like Noriega like never benefited from the illicit drug trade coming out of Latin America. Like that's just like childish, you know, even though they all claim that he didn't, even though there wasn't actually that much proof. But then as well as that, so he was benefiting monetarily from Latin America, the drug trade. He was on the CIA payroll, DEA payroll. He was just working all sides, and he, in my opinion, like was sort of a mastermind at just like balancing his relationships. So as the drug trade continued to increase, like more shit's coming out of Colombia and Latin America, more shit's getting to the US, the DEA is getting more funding. Nancy Reagan announces the war on drugs. Like drugs is just, it's becoming such a problem in the US. It genuinely is. Like it's just, drugs are piling in through the country. Noriega just, he's like their guy, right? He's their guy. He's closest to Colombia. Panama's right next to it. He's curbing as much as he can, but he's benefiting from it. And it escalates until the Iran-Contra affair. And that was the turning point. So the mid-1980s, like Noriega's like the best friend of the DEA and the United States government in Latin America, arguably the world, right? He is like their closest ally, somebody that's acting upon their interests. Yeah, he might be taking his own cut, like those pilots, right? But he's serving the US government. And then the Iran-Contra affair happens. The US has egg on their face. It's the greatest public embarrassment for the United States government ever, at least in televised history, where the general public knows what's going on, and they need a scapegoat. And Noriega became that scapegoat because in 1984, Poindexter and Oliver North, do you know those names?
Yep.
Those guys? Yeah. Poindexter and Oliver North come to Panama. They sit down with Noriega. They say, "Hey, we're losing this fight in Nicaragua. The Contras are losing. We need you to train the Contras here in Panama. We need you to send Panamanian troops to Nicaragua to fight against the Sandinistas. And we need you to help us stop the spread of communism in Nicaragua." And Noriega said no. He said no. And then that was the turning point. Everything changed after that.